they're about as tall as this. So we're just going to speak from over here. Good afternoon. My name is Renee St. Hilaire, and I'm the principal at East Farms Elementary in Farmington. We're very excited to be here today, and a little bit nervous, but deep breath. I want to share a little bit about how our students put together their presentation for today. It really exhibits the personalized learning that we believe in at East Farms and the inquiry approach. So upon doing this, I had the students and we all came together and we looked at a number of presentations, speakers, and they studied those presentations. And from the studying, they came up with a criteria list, what they thought was effective about the presentations. Now, I was thinking, oh, they're going to say things like eye contact and speak loud, speak clearly, all those things you think would come right out, and they did. But they also said things like, did you hear how that person stressed a word? That was really showing passion for what they were talking about. And I said, wow, let's put that down on the criteria list. They said other things like, well, when he was funny, just there, did you notice how he had a little bit of wait time and he didn't talk right away? So they really were able to examine the nuances of the speakers. Now we watched the speakers 3 times, so we really did some close viewing, and we do a lot of work at East Farms School around close reading and close listening, but we've really been studying how to do it with close viewing as well. From our criteria list, we then started to think about what are our topics? What is East Farms all about? What is personalized learning all about? So they helped me pick the topics that you're going to hear about today. And then they went home for homework and they developed subtopics, what it was that they wanted to share with you. So they helped me actually create our presentation for you today. And then they got up and they spoke off the top of their head. There's no script. They deeply know what they're about to talk about. And we would rehearse it, and then we would say, here's what you're doing well, and here's what we think you need to work on. And they would critique one another. They would also self-evaluate themselves. So I'm very proud to introduce my students, but they wanted to also let you know you have a learning target for today. So your learning target, I can learn more about how East Farms students lead through personalized learning. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my 3rd and 4th graders, Hugh, Layla, and Sasha. If you come on up here.
Hi, I'm Hugh, and I go to East Farms School. And today I'm going to be talking to you about learning targets. At East Farms School, we use the Vision of the Graduate. The Vision of the Graduate has 4 main learning targets: to be a critical thinker, to be self-directed and resourceful, effectively communicate and collaborate, and to be a problem solver and innovator. These are supposed to be expected by the end when you graduate high school. Next, we have daily learning targets. At East Farms School, we use daily learning targets. Daily learning targets, as you can see on the board, have I can statements. Teachers do this so that kids know when they should meet the goal by the end of a mini lesson. And these change every day. Next, we have unit learning targets. At East Farms School, we use unit learning targets. We probably take 15 daily learning targets to get where we need to be, because 1 week is 5, so it changes. This all impacts our learning because it tells when kids should meet the expectation of daily learning targets and unit learning targets in the Vision of the Graduate. Thank you, and now I'd like to introduce Layla.
Hello, I'm Sasha Ryskowski. I'm a 4th grader at East Farms School, and right now I'm going to talk to you about growth mindset. When you have a growth mindset, you have work habits. A work habit is a good habit to get into. For example, if you always put your homework in the right homework bin and you never have anyone to tell you what to do, you always know what to do, then that's a great habit to get into to grow your mind. Secondly, when we have a growth mindset, we persevere and persist. What this means is that if we're having trouble on a problem, we try every strategy that we can, and that we never give up, even when it's really hard. Now, we have growth mindset, but we also have fixed mindset, and we don't want fixed mindset. A fixed mindset is when you're fixed on something and that you can never get your mind off of it, and that you never try anything new and you never take risks. Now, we don't want fixed mindset at our school at East Farms, and you don't want them at your schools either. Also, when you have a growth mindset, you self-evaluate yourselves. We self-evaluate ourselves based on what we've done on the last test. For example, a spelling test or a math test. If we can see what we've done very well in our test, say a strategy, and we can see what we need to work on because we haven't done so well. Lastly, at East Farm School, we learned that mistakes are awesome. We learned that mistakes are awesome because we can learn from them and we can see what was a good strategy to use and what wasn't a good strategy to use. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce Hugh again.
Hi, I'm back again. And now I'm going to be teaching you about goal setting at East Farm School. At East Farm School, we use checklists and criteria charts. As you can see, the picture on the board, it shows a criteria chart or a short-term goal. One different kind of way we use checklists is a report card. For example, let's say someone gets all meets in writing and all nears in math. They probably need more work in math. Next, we have short-term and long-term goals. Short-term goals are kind of like daily learning targets because the kids want to set goals for the daily learning target. And long-term goals. It's also an example on the board. Next, we have sticky notes and other work. At East Farm School, we use sticky notes. Sticky notes are thinking of the book by the reader. For example, let's say someone gets a lot of character traits, a lot of predictions, and a lot of visualizings, and they need more questions. Next, we have math assessments. At East Farm School, we get to see what we've done well on math assessments and what we need to work on a math assessment. We have how the kid is growing and how the kid can work on that. Thank you, and now I'd like to introduce Layla.
Hi, I'm Layla Tawai. I'm a third grader at East Farm School. Today I'm going to talk about our inquiry learning. This year, the third graders started off with a unit of building a reading life. They observed and investigated other classes' reading, and they took notes of how they were being leaders of their own learning and reading, and how they were being successful. From their notes, they built up a question with a partner, and they researched it. They researched it by looking at even more classes' reading, and they created a tool to support their question. For example, if a question was how do readers use reading logs, the tool that the partnership made was a reading log to support their question. After their research, they shared their learning with the first graders, and after that, the first graders' minds were blown. Right here is a picture of a group of partners sharing their research with the kindergarten and first graders. Thank you. Now I'd like to welcome Sasha. Hello, and right now I'm going to talk to you about student-led conferences. At East Farm School, when we have student-led conferences, we are individually responsible. We are individually responsible because we have to show our parents that we're learning something at school and that we're not just daydreaming all day. To show that we're individually responsible, we have to give evidence of our learning. What this means is that we have a template that has the unit and what a good strategy is. and we show our parents what our good strategy was. But none of us are perfect, so we show what we also need to work on. Lastly, we are presenting to our parents and our teacher when we are having student-led conferences. We have to present to our parents that we're really learning something, and not only what we're learning, but why we're learning it. Thank you, and now I'd like to introduce Layla again. For now, I'm going to talk about students on instruction rounds. Last month, administrators and students went out and observed other classrooms. They took notes of how they were being leaders of their own learning. Not only did they jot down what they were doing to be leaders of their own learning, but how. After their observing, they came back with the administrators and made a story of what East Farm School is doing really well and what they can improve on. Not only did the students on instruction rounds see how other people were being leaders of their own learning, but they also learned for themselves. They did this by, for example, if they saw someone else helping someone on a math problem, the students on instruction rounds might think, well, maybe I should use that in my own learning so I can be a leader of my own learning myself. Thank you. Now please welcome Ms. St. Hilaire.
Wow, aren't they impressive? I hope you've seen some of the things we're working on at East Farms, but we are in a continuous improvement cycle. We're constantly reflecting and thinking about what's working well for us, what do we need to do to improve, and this really has been a concerted effort in the District of Farmington. For the past 6 years, we've been working on these very small steps to kind of work up to where we are today. We have a lot more that we're looking to do, and I hope to learn a lot more here today. And we're also open to questions. So if you have any questions, just let us know, and our students are also willing to answer questions. Yes?
I think you talked a little bit about mastery-based progression as part of the topic today. Is that something that you're doing in the classrooms as well?
Yes, we're definitely working on mastery-based. So an example of that, a little bit, they talked about this in the assessments. So a lot of our assessments that we're doing, the kids actually take a test. They receive the test back without any instruction, and they're allowed to actually readdress some of the errors that they had. In the beginning, as you can imagine, that was a little bit difficult for some of our teachers to think about, some of the parents, how could you give it back? But what's happened is they've become real critical analyzers of how they take the test, what kind of errors they might make, and what we're finding is that the third, fourth assessment, they have fewer errors to begin with because they become so critical of themselves, saying, you know, I'm the kind of person who has computation errors. Let me slow down and check those. Or I'm the kind of person who doesn't read the second question in the problem. There's actually two, so I need to work on that. So we're really developing quite reflective thinkers, and we're using this mastery-based learning and assessment strategies throughout K-12. Yes?
So this is a question for the kids.
Yes.
So you're in fourth grade, right?
Third and fourth.
Okay, so last year and the year before when you were in second and third grade and stuff, was it different from what you're doing now? And if so, what do you think about the difference?
Well, we always really had this opportunity for us to always be leaders of our own learning because it's, like she said, it started 6 years ago and we've been here for around 5. And so it's always been a great opportunity for us to all learn about how we're leaders of our own learning and that that we can't always depend on people, because in the real world, we can't always depend on people.
Yes.
What's the most difficult part for the kids about managing your own learning? What do you find is most difficult?
The most difficult part is sometimes if you're having trouble on like a certain problem or something, well, that might be the difficult part, but instead of to be leaders of your own learning, you could keep trying and use tools to solve it, or instead of asking the teacher, you can ask a friend, and they'll probably find a way to help you.
Adding on to her, we also use growth mindsets in math. So like when we get stuck or we don't know what to do next, we use sentence starters to help us so we can move on and go to the next problem.
So I'll just add on to that. Actually, I was going to talk about growth mindset from the teacher and principal perspective. When we first started this, probably the hardest thing was developing the growth mindset. In the beginning, students didn't want to make a mistake, or they really didn't have the stamina to persevere. So we did a lot of work around developing growth mindsets. And now it's amazing. I really don't see them having difficulty. They know strategies that they can use. And we do still provide some scaffolding, as Hugh talked about, sentence starters or criteria charts that help them push through the difficult parts. Yes?
I have a question, maybe you can answer this, or maybe for a hybrid book. So what role does direct instruction play in your classroom, and what does it look like when kids are meeting their daily learning goals at different rates?
When kids are meeting their daily learning goals, it means that they're really being a leader of their own learning, and if they're meeting it, that means they can set even more goals, and that's even better. Adding on to Layla, in different grades it always looks different because depending on what they're learning in class, but the one thing that's the same is that what's the same about all grades is that they always try to do their best, and that since they have a learning target, that's their goal to meet, that they're always working so hard to reach that.
So we still have direct instruction. I'll answer the first part of your question. All of our classrooms typically have some type of a mini lesson. It could be at the beginning, or it could be somewhere in the middle, or it could be somewhere at the end. We're also starting to work on where our learning targets happen. Sometimes they're right out in front. You know, boys and girls, here's the learning target, this is the expectation. We unpack it with them, what does it mean? Other times, it's sort of unveiled. So in our more inquiry type lessons, we don't start out with the learning target. We will have them explore a bit, and then sometimes we'll ask, what do you think the learning target is? And then we'll unveil it. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about the communication with parents? Because you want to have that family connection and buying into the program.
That's a great question. I don't know if the kids want to answer this part, but I'll talk about it from the school perspective. So about 6 years ago, our superintendent, Dr. Greeter, developed with representatives from elementary, middle, and high school our vision for the graduate and our teaching and learning principles. From there, we developed our school development plans. And when I first got there, I think our school development plan was like 50 pages long, and I thought, how am I going to communicate this to families? So we came up with a one-pager, and we literally give that one-pager out to every single parent, every single employee that works in the district, and we also share it with kids so that everyone is responsible for that school development plan, and many of the things that you've seen today were implemented in the school development plan little by little. So we really build that communication through that as our number one vehicle. But we also have parents coming into the school, whether it be for professional development when we implemented our new math program. We use learning targets in our presentations with parents. And of course, nothing has been better or more convincing than our student-led conferences. I think when you see the kids actually present at the student-led conference to their parents are wowed with how articulate they can be about their learning, where they actually are as a learner, and sometimes even better than how the teacher could explain it. They're harder on themselves. Yes?
I heard, I think it was Hugh and Sasha talking about, the daily learning targets. Did I get that right? The daily learning targets. Do you encounter the situation where the daily learning targets are so different that you can't have that common lesson? I mean, can you have when the teacher gives that 15, 20 minutes of instruction, is that going to reach all students, or are they so individualized? Does that happen? Do you avoid that? What I see, maybe it's a potential pitfall, maybe it's never happened.
So I think I'm understanding the question to be is how do we differentiate for all learners with
does the
one learning
common
type?
lesson apply to, can all students understand the teachers? Students have their individual learning targets, but then you have a lesson, I forget what you exactly called it, but you have a lesson that you teach to the whole group.
Right.
Is that whole group ready for that lesson?
The daily learning targets are for the whole group generally, and they're usually broad enough that there is easy access and entry for any student. It's further differentiated by the manner in which the lesson is taught. So for example, if we do an anchor task, it can be differentiated in and of itself depending upon the ability that the student has, how far they take it, the questioning that the teacher might provide to those individuals. So right now we're finding that the learning targets are the must-haves for all the students. They must be able to have those skills. But then we can kind of support them or bring them further through our questioning and our scaffolding.
Okay, thank you.
One last
Yes.
one for the kids. What is
Yes.
the most fun about personalized learning?
Well, when we do stuff by ourselves, it feels good to be able to do something by yourself without a teacher telling you. And usually that feels really good.
To add on to Hugh, I personally think that if you're working with someone else, it just is way better, because if someone else is working with you, you can brainstorm a lot of more ideas, and yourself it isn't as much. So with more than one person, it can make a big difference.
To add on to Layla and Hugh, I think that personalized learning is amazing because it teaches us how we're always going to we're never going to have anyone to show us this way, and that we're never going to have anyone to be at our foot and hand all the time. And so we need to be self-directed, and we have to do our own thinking sometimes, and we're not always going to have help to help us. So I think it's really good for all.
And then we're going to let the next group go.
Thank you. So guys, how do you feel about it? What's your reaction to presenting to kindergartners? And what do you think, how do you think they reacted to your presenting to them?
Well, since I was a third grader and I was presenting, when I was presenting to them, it seemed like they were their heads were what? They didn't really know. So we used our tools that we made and we gave them to them so it would be an easier image of how, of what they're learning. And it felt really good also because you're teaching other people what you learn, just like what we're doing here.
Give you a little more context for that inquiry learning. One of the things that we're actually improving on and working on at East Farm School, all of our assemblies and our celebrations of learning, we're now trying to ask the kids, who do you want your audience to be? So for example, in this third grade inquiry that Layla was talking about on building a reading life, The teacher thought, oh, let's do it for the second graders. The kids said, no, the second graders are going to have this next year. The first graders, that's when you really learn to read. We want to catch them early. And we also want all of the literacy specialists there because they have the most impact on the readers. And we were like, yeah. So now, whenever we do a celebration of learning or an inquiry project, we're asking the kids also to not only choose what they're going to study and how they're going to study it, but who they're going to present it to. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you all for this. It was fantastic. I wish Dr. Zhao could have hung around to hear that, because this